the Garden Report, back for an August edition of the show. We're going to try to get through August here and find some stuff to talk about, but I don't think there's enough time to imagine what the Celtics are going to look like this year, as they've made some pretty substantial changes this summer. I brought in one of the best to talk about that, Mo Dakhil from Bleacher Report, The Athletic, all the rest, and of course, his great One Mo Thing video segment. Great to talk to you again here today, Mo.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm always happy to come on.
We've talked a lot over the last couple of years here about the Celtics offense. We have a pretty interesting puzzle ahead of us again this year. Off an East Finals loss, off a pretty erratic postseason offensively. For all the reasons pretty much we've talked about in the past, struggles against zone, turnover problems, pace, facilitating, all the rest. And they finally made a pretty substantial overhaul to the core players on this team. Brown's back long term. Marcus Smart's out. Derek White's the point guard. And Kristaps Porzingis joins the fold here as a third high usage player. One who's a great shooter, one who's pretty versatile offensively, especially if you're projecting him to do what he did last year. So what do you make of that big move, the Smart for Porzingis trade?
Well, I mean, at first when it was Porzingis for Brogdon, I was like, "Oh, this is great, all in, awesome." I think you lose a lot when you lose Smart. And I think
so. You're one of those people who thinks that's a real loss.
I think so. I know he didn't have a great year. I know he had the ankle injury. I know he was getting older and things like that. And I know he didn't replicate what he had done the year before when the team made it to the finals. But like there was an element from him, like he was their best playmaker for the most part, like most consistent, I would say. And it's not even that I loved his playmaking. It felt like more like he knew he had to make these passes more than anything else. And hopefully you're going to get that from Derek White and you're going to lift that up and continue in that trend. But I think the loss of him in the locker room to a degree, like being, whether it's good or bad, but being able to call their guys on their BS is an important thing there. And I think that was stuff we saw, really over the past few years that Smart developed into. Now, Porzingis comes in and he brings in a lot of pieces that would really help this team. One, another pick and pop shooter, another guy who can post up when they have switches, although I'm not 100% sure we can expect him to be as great as he was in the post this year. Excuse me, this coming season as he was last season in Washington. I think there's times where it's really kind of hit or miss on that stuff. And I think that's one of those things that I'll be curious about. And then my other thing I'm really concerned about is like, I just don't want him floating on the perimeter. You got enough of those dudes. You guys jack a ton of threes. Like my view of the Celtics is the entire offense needs an overhaul and needs to change what they're focused on all the time. Like we knew the stat where it's like, hey, when the Celtics shoot 40% from three, they're winning the game. And there were definitely games you guys won when they didn't shoot 40% from three. But it just makes it so much harder when you're just jacking up 43s a game that you're so dependent on that. And I think those are the things that are concerning. And then you added another high 3-point shooter, like high attempts, and I think that's important.
Yeah, and his high came in Dallas. I'd say a fairly similar system to what the Celtics are trying to do here in terms of the spacing and all that and the shooting and everything else. So I could see him matching that total, especially if he's going to play the big minutes. You'd expect him to here. And that, that was one of the first questions I had for Joe after was, another spot up shooting big in Al Horford. I know he's much later in his career and his role has changed and all that. Nearly exclusively shot threes this year. So that's my first big question is he going to be an almost exclusive spot up shooter? Because I know they've talked about the posting up, and that's a big topic here, a new element to the Celtics offense potentially here. He actually posted up more per game than the entire Celtics did last year, which is going to be an interesting shift. And, they're going to want him to shoot a lot of threes. There's no doubt about it. But is there room in this offense? I know you're expecting an overhaul.
Hoping, not expecting. hoping.
Okay.
Nobody listens to me, Bobby. Like, we got to understand this. Nobody listens to me. So but hoping we'd
I'm
see some.
dubious too. Yeah, like I'm hoping for some real changes here. And again, I'm not Mr. Post Up and thinking that's a real game changer here, but it'd be nice a couple of times a game, get a steal, transition maybe, mismatch. I know they're always big on that, to just have him go up and over a guy, much like you would have hoped Rob could do in recent years, and much like Horford was able to do earlier in his career. And that's really the area of his game where he's lost the most with age.
Yeah, and the one thing too, though, like, part of it is the other guys have to be willing to make those passes, and I mean Tatum and Brown.
Can
Like,
anyone make an entry pass today?
that's across the NBA. Like, if you really want to get me like going completely nuts, my colleague,
I
Seth
can't wait to
Partnow-
see them try to do that this year.
right, and so it's like the hope of like you can't enter the ball when he has a switch, and but also Tatum likes to attack bigs. Brown likes to attack bigs. Like, how often are they really going to back out and then give it to him in the post when he has a small? Like, there's an element like those guys have to be willing and involved in getting him the ball. Like, there's a focus to that stuff. And I think that's an important aspect that we don't always see. And those two, Tatum and Brown in particular, are not great passers. We want to see them take that leap as playmakers and improve as playmakers. I'm not asking for 8 assists a game or 9 assists a game or anything, but like, we need to see a little bit more of that willingness. And it's going to be interesting to see if that's what we get from them when they do get the switch and he does have a small on him. Because that was the difference, right? Washington was not a very good team last year. So when when you have that switch, yeah, Monty Morris is looking to make that pass, right? Like, it's a difference when it's Monty Morris, when it's other guys like that are making that pass versus it's Tatum who's thinking like, no, I could take my guy one-on-one and that's an and one, and I think there's an element of that stuff that they're going to have to really kind of work through and find that balance.
Yeah, and balance is the right word, because when you have a big three, and I know no one's looking at this and saying it's KG, Pierce, and Allen, or Bosch, Wade, and LeBron, but it is three guys who have, right around 30% usage rates throughout their career. Porzingis through every stop. I know he's played with Luka. I know he played with Beal and Kuzma last year, but he's always been a high usage guy. And that was probably the second big question I had when he came is he the one stepping back, sacrificing? He never shoots corner three, so I don't think he's going to be standing in the corner. Maybe he's shooting on most of his shots above the break there and in the pick and pop. But, he took a salary reduction in his extension here, so there's an obvious desire to sacrifice. I mean, choosing this destination in itself was him sacrificing. He could have gone to Utah and kept taking a ton of shots and been that guy still. So he's obviously going to be willing to sacrifice here. I think we've seen Tatum over the last few years become a more willing passer. And Jalen, we know the storyline on him coming out of the East Finals when it comes to the playmaking there. So how are every one of those guys in that big three going to have to sacrifice to make this work?
Yeah, I mean, they all have to, right? It's not one guy sacrifices. They all have to do the whole thing of, figuring out the process, right? There are going to be times when Tatum shouldn't make that pass on the switch and should attack.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got to figure out when to make the pass and when not to. And same for Brown. And there's going to be an element of like, hey, I know I have a good shot, but that's a great shot over there. I need to make that pass. And they've gotten better at it in that regard. But I think there's an important aspect of you have to kind of work through this. This is going to be a work in progress. Excuse me. Like, they're going to have to take some time to figure this out and figure they need a good training camp together. Really just figuring out all that stuff. They all need to be healthy and ready to roll and continue to go through with everything that they have. And I think those are the things they'll hopefully find that balance. If they're going to be successful, they will need to find that balance and know when to sacrifice and when not to. And then the good thing though for Boston too is you can also stagger a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's a little easier to kind of find that rhythm, and at times, hey, when Brown goes to the bench, it could be 2-man game with Tatum and Porzingis, and I think this is a element of, you got to kind of flow through this. And I think they'll figure it out. And how they sacrifice, they're all going to have to sacrifice.
I think the tentative plan, and this is what many people predicted right away was that they're going to play Rob and Porzingis together, which I found interesting because Rob, his pretty much only offensive game, unless you're buying the tape from this offseason and the, training videos of him getting up those jump shots, his only real offensive game is rolling to the rim. So he's going to kind of need to occupy the middle of that floor. He's going to have to be setting a lot of those screens. And Porzingis, I think that even more, to go back to how we started this conversation, is going to position him on the perimeter more often than not. And I get the defensive possibilities of those two are captivating. Like there could be some really cool things they do with those two defensively. But offensively, I think that's going to be a big work in progress. Like those two finding out what parts of the floor they're going to occupy. If it was my choice, I'd lean towards starting Horford next to him because those two guys can both space out the floor. Horford last year got used to playing the perimeter exclusively, and Porzingis can play in that in-between area around the rim or other areas of the floor. Like there won't be as much overlap, I think, between those two as there is between Rob and Porzingis. But I get it. You want to involve Rob. You want him to continue taking steps, and you want him to grow. So you want him playing with the best players on the team out there. But how do you feel about the double big dynamic coming back to this team?
Yeah, like that gets really it. First off, you take away any opportunities for him to really post up.
Yeah.
Right. In that instance with him and Rob in that sense. Defensively, yes, because I think Rob can actually do a pretty good job guarding fours a little bit. And I think he can kind of open up more opportunities in that sense. Porzingis can't really guard fours, right? The way that the four position is now, you can't really do that. Like he's not really got that lateral quickness like he used to in that regard. And I think so. I think it can work defensively, but offensively, it really gets the lane gets clogged up. And then now we're leaning heavily into threes again. It's one man rolling, and Rob, when he rolls, he's a force when he rolls to the rim. And that's something you're going to have him keep doing when that stuff. And then Porzingis space, it's still a very difficult sort of thing where then their offense just stays exactly the same. Like I said, for me, I want to see the offense have a little bit more versatility across the board. I want to see them kind of change it up. I don't need 30 post-ups a game, but 5 or 10 would be great. And I think that's an important aspect with that stuff. And I think that's an element of those things. And I think when you put Rob in that lineup, you lose that. And so it'll be interesting to see how they kind of figure it out. And again, I think we're going to see a lot of experimenting in the first half of the season from the Celtics in terms of lineups and try to figure this stuff out, because this is a huge change for them.
Yeah, pretty big. And you mentioned it, the staggering of the lineups. I'm very interested to see what the substitution patterns look like, what the bench unit's going to look like, because that was another area that struggled last year. The Brown-led bench unit struggled immensely. That ended up killing his, analytic numbers. And Porzingis, he might be able to be that guy who you can just throw the ball to and let him cook when Tatum's off the floor. Brown and him might end up playing that two-man game. And, you get Tatum a little more rest this year. Of course, Grant's gone off that second unit. Someone's going to have to step up and replace him. They're probably hoping for a Shea Brissett to do that. We'll see. And then you got Peyton Pritchard back, stepping up one spot in that depth chart with Smart out. It's going to be interesting to see how they piece together a second unit here, because they did lose some depth. They have a couple unsung guys between Bant and Brissett, the rookie Jordan Walsh coming in here, all trying to break through. That's where there's really going to be some competition, I think, and some, as you said, experimenting to try to put a good second unit together.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the stuff they're going to have to flow through and figure out. Like, here's the good news in terms of for the Celtics. The East has not gotten that much better, right? Like, they have room. They're still in the top tier of the East. Whether you say they're on the same tier as Milwaukee or maybe a step lower, that's up to everybody can figure out and decide where they are in that. But they're right there. Even if Miami makes the trade for Dame, it's not like it's like the West, where the West is a complete gauntlet. There are going to be nights where they can say, hey, let's roll out some stuff. It's okay if we take a loss. We're still going to finish probably in the top 3, if not the top 2 in the East, most likely, assuming, and knock on wood, good health for everybody. And I think that's the stuff. So you have the luxury of getting to experiment with that. So it's going to take time finding the second unit. And I think that's an important aspect with the coaching side of it is, hey, let's play with this stuff here. Let's see how it goes. Let's figure out who works with what. And, it's amazing in my experience in the NBA how like stuff on paper, like, hey, we put these 5 guys together, it should work. And for whatever reason, it doesn't. But if for some reason this guy and this guy together, this pairing that we didn't think would work, we're killing it. And that's the stuff you kind of stumble upon sometimes throughout the season. And I think the Celtics are in a good position where they're not a team we're going to be like, oh, they might be fighting for a play-in spot or just fighting to get into the playoffs. They're a team we expect to be there towards the end. So I think they have that luxury of trying to figure that stuff out in terms of experimenting. And yeah, like losing Grant Williams, who was kind of put to the bench. And at times, I'm not a big Grant guy, but there were times where he made sense and there are times where he didn't. And I think it's sort of trying to fill that role. All right, how do we fill those minutes? And maybe it is a lesser role for Horford, but he plays more in the second unit and helps along with that side. Who knows? But there's going to be a lot of playing around with these things for Joe and that staff to kind of figure out.
Speaking of that inside basketball thing, I always love, and I know it's not this simple, but Porzingis torched this team in March. Brissett had the best game of his career against the Celtics, and Ban had this ridiculous fourth quarter against them. I forget if it was this year, his rookie year. Those definitely make an impression, don't they?
Well, I
that
mean,
always seems to be how it goes.
It's always those things where you're like, hey, if I get, this guy's always killing us, so let's just get him on our team.
Yeah.
So that it kind of gives us a little bit of a break, right? Like this dude's whatever, Celtic killer, and then you get him on the team. Sometimes it just doesn't work out that way because you're like, damn, like the only time we see him is when he's killing us.
Right.
But you don't see some of the other games with that stuff. Although, like, look, Porzingis had a great season last year.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't mind this trade for Boston. I didn't mind it at the time, and I thought it was actually really good value considering they also got 2 picks back for this. And I think that's a phenomenal haul for Smart in that sense. Like I would have thought that's kind of an overpay for Memphis to a degree, but I think there's an element of let's just see how it kind of plays out because he's got to find his flow. We all thought Porzingis and Doncic was going to be a great pairing. And it's easy now in hindsight to be like, hey, that didn't make like that didn't work out the way we thought it would. Like it's just that's the kind of stuff that happens, like the chemistry's got to be right. They got to understand each other and they got to be in the right kind of frame and things got to just sort of work out perfectly in that sense. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I'm actually really excited to watch the Celtics this year to see how they work in Porzingis and if they can just please change up the offense a little bit.
There's been teasing of it, so we'll see how it actually pans out when they get on the floor. The last question I have on them, Derek White named point guard as expected. The analytics love him. They'd even say he's a borderline all-star, and I think we saw shades of that last year into the playoffs too, had some big moments. I'm excited for him getting propped up here. Obviously, I'm a smart guy too. They had to see, I guess, how a shakeup would go, and they had to, especially if they're going to extend him this fall, prop up White somehow because he would end up on the bench. He'd end up floating. He'd be a guy who would sacrifice and almost be too passive at times. So this puts him right in the middle of everything they're doing. We'll see what happens with Brogdon. He was obviously floated throughout the summer and is hurt. So we'll see how healthy he is. But this is White's team now from a point guard standpoint. And we're going to see more of his game. And a guy being as versatile as he does, that excites me.
Yeah, no, like he's got, listen, the numbers really made it pretty clear he should have been playing over Smart in the fourth quarter of games and things like that.
There was an infuriating stretch there for a couple of weeks where he'd always be on the bench.
Yeah, and it was just and just even if he wasn't playing over Smart, I was just like he should be playing in the game. You could find those minutes for him.
Brogdon, maybe,
in that regard. Yeah, like whatever, being stuck into all that stuff. And I think that's an element of, like like I said, like trading Smart, like I don't know how much of a drop off it is to White. Or if it even is a drop off to White, maybe it's an improvement, but we'll see what it is when he's now in the starting role. When your role completely changes, now let's see if you can handle that stuff and be in that stuff. He was at times he was some of the best Celtics player during the Miami series, and I thought that was an important thing. And I think you'll have to see how this sort of flows into everything with what they do. And I think it'll be. I'm fascinated to see if he can keep up because remember when he first got there. When they traded him, he didn't have a great playoffs that year.
No, shot horribly,
shot terribly, and things like that. And then last year, shot it really well, was really good. All right, what are we getting? Because what the Celtics can't have is very up and down. right? They need consistent play at the point guard level. That's going to be the most important thing. And I think we'll have to see how that kind of plays out for him in that regard. And the important thing for the Celtics, because it's a question of whether they extend him next season, they need to see this. Because with the new CBA too, you got to figure out who are your guys. Because once you hit that second apron, it's almost impossible to improve your team unless you just get lucky with a ton of amazing vet minimum deals. And I think that's really where it's going to be fascinating, because going to extend Tatum next year, that's a no-brainer, right? So now you've committed, the majority of your cap to two guys, which is going to be the situation that happens to a lot of teams. And now you need to figure out, is White our guy? And this was the year to do it.
Yeah, he can make up to 26 a year in that extension. So he'd be another pretty expensive guy on this team that is built around three really expensive guys now. I want to kick around some other stuff later this summer. Of course, we're sponsored by FanDuel. Head over to FanDuel.com/Boston. Get up to $200 in bonus bets. Baseball, it's everything right now. Women's World Cup going on as well. I put a few wagers on that. You can go to FanDuel.com/Boston. and get up to $200 in bonus bets when you head over there. Of course, 21 plus and present in Mass. They're an official sports wagering partner of CLNS, the official sports wagering partner of CLNS, and partner of Major League Baseball as their season keeps going. Check out the futures, same game parlays, player props, and all the rest over there. Ton to look through. Great website, great app too. Just a great experience over at FanDuel.com/Boston. So go get your $200 in bonus bets. Gambling helpline, ma.org, 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. All right. This is one of my favorite events every couple of years, Mo. The World Cup's coming. I know you're an international guy. You love the FIBA game. I was actually talking to someone at the, we were playing some pickup, and he's about to go play overseas. One of the guys who was playing, he's like, I can't get used to the goaltending rule. Like, this 7-foot guy comes up, he's already got this advantage, and he can just smack the backboard while I'm going up from my floater. So yeah, all of that, you're gonna see it. US, interesting team. They had a very Celtics heavy team 4 years ago when they were in China. This year, no Celtics, but some of the younger stars of the league, the defensive player of the year, and Jaren Jackson. Jalen Brunson's going to lead the team at the point, I'd imagine. Bridges coming off his great year. Edwards, who's really trying to take that leap next season. Halliburton, who's, prime for all NBA status. And then you got a veteran in Brandon Ingram, who's, going to try to be that rock for this team. But, it's an unproven group, and they lost 4 years ago. I think there's a real chance that they could lose this too. Like, I'm looking at Team Canada with Shea and Murray. Like, they're going to be really good. But, if you're a Celtics fan, you'll get to see Porzingis with Latvia. You'll get to see Brissett with that Canadian group. I hear Giannis might play too. I don't buy it, but he might be in that group with the U.S. I know Greece is in that group that they're playing in there. So what excites you about this World Cup?
Honestly, I'm excited to watch these young guys. Like, my favorite part about the World Cup with these guys, like this USA roster, like you said, very unproven. But it's going to be fun to watch the competition level with these guys, just even training against each other, And I think I'm a little sad there's not a couple more vets in there, because I think that was the beauty of the USA teams, was it was always young guys and then a couple of vets, that would always be there to kind of almost show them the way. And Team USA vets, I should say, not NBA vets in general. But I think you have an element of, like highly competitive practices and all that stuff. I'm a bit worried with that, but I'm excited to watch all these young teams. I'm excited to watch this Canada team, though, a little bit more than Team USA, just because I think they're going to be a ton of fun.
They're that team for years. It was like, if their guys play, they're going to be a problem. They weren't even in the Olympics.
Right. They failed to qualify for the Olympics. And that was also part of it, was because that was the year Jamal Murray got hurt. And Murray has always consistently played when he's been healthy. And so it's going to be fun to watch Murray and Shea on the same team. Like, that's going to be pretty dope. And really to just watch that kind of backcourt with that stuff. I think it'll be a very interesting Team USA squad. I think those are the two most interesting teams. It sucks. No Giannis for Greece. No Jokic for Serbia. Like, Serbia would have been really, really good.
Especially playing at the level he was.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of a little bit that situation that kind of sucks. in that regard. You know, we are going to have, it looks like Doncic for Slovenia. You know, you said Porzingis for Latvia. Like there are some names. It's always fun to kind of keep an eye on it. But one team I'm watching, and this is a very deep cut, but my guy Dave Dufour is working for the Georgia national team.
Okay.
And I don't know if I don't even think they've qualified, or but I'll be keeping an eye on it because I know if they haven't qualified, they're trying to in the coming up run up to this World Cup, because there's always a few wild card spots. So I'm rooting for the Georgia national team more than anything else.
It's floating around too. You might see Al Horford with DR. I don't know. That's been floating around for a while. I don't think so at his age and try and get ready for the season. But Towns is playing there, which is going to be really interesting. He's committed, and that's a team that's probably going to make it out of that group. Canada, as you mentioned, really tough group. Latvia, France, Lebanon, and only 2 of those teams are going to advance. So they're going to have to fight through a pretty tough group there. I don't know how good Latvia is around Porzingis, but they do have that high-level guy there. Spain's always tough.
And there's always a dude that pops that we've never heard of on some of these teams. We're like,
because the game's so different, right?
Right. But we're always like, dude, this guy should be in the NBA. What are we doing? You know, and there's always some random dude that we're looking at going like, whoa, these dudes ought to be like, we're paying attention to that stuff. So it'll be fun to kind of watch how this sort of plays.
Or there are those NBA guys who are just on another level, like Evan Fournier. He took down USA on his own.
But you're also like, there's always like some dude you're like, I remember Rudy Fernandez. Like there's always, or like whatever, some random dude where you're like, yeah, I remember when he had the cup of coffee in the league, and all of a sudden he's torching your team.
I love the World Cup. That's getting going in a couple of weeks now. Training camp underway. We'll see who ultimately makes these rosters and go from there. It's nice to get that little early meaningful basketball too, well before training camp. So once training camp does get here, I want to know, just right after this ad read, who you're most excited to watch this NBA season, because I have a couple guys I'm really excited about here. First, AG1, great sponsor of the Garden Report. It's just that scoop in your water each morning. You're getting 75 vitamins, minerals, adaptogens, probiotics, and more. And they're throwing in, as I've told you a million times, the vitamin D, year supply, and 5 free travel packs when you head over there. Cool gear, great reviews. You can check them out. You don't have to take our word for it, how great this is. Pretty much getting all the stuff your body needs this summer. So head over to drinkag1.com/garden for that year supply of vitamin D, 5 free travel packs, and more with your first purchase. That's drinkag1.com/garden. So let's go with 3 guys you're excited to watch this season. I know you're intrigued by the Celtics. Obviously, Porzingis is going to be a guy people look at and wonder, is this trajectory continuing for him? Is he like all NBA level? I know they've changed all NBA, but who, if you had to throw out 3 names, are you most excited to watch this year?
Well, one, I'm not doing the obvious one, which is like Wemby and all that stuff. Like we're all excited for that, right? Like we want to see what he's going to do. I'm excited I want to see what Chet Holmgren does.
That was on my list,
because I think that's the most interesting guy for the most important guy for the Oklahoma City Thunder. If he's really good and can provide rebounding and defense, and rim protection, which is something they desperately needed. If he can provide that for them, this is a playoff team, a top 6 playoff team in the not a play-in team. This is a top 6 team, I think, in the West, because I think they got everything else with Shea, with Giddey, with the Jalen Williams, both of them. I think they have a lot of solid stuff with what they have, and I think he can be that final piece where we go like, oh wow, this is the next young team on the rise, and this is who it is. So I'm going to be fascinated with that. Obviously, we were robbed of his rookie year last year. Going to be excited to see what he does. I think that's probably like one of the top guys I'm excited to watch this season.
I'm going to throw out, you stole my first one, so I had to rework here. Paolo Banchero.
Yep.
I don't think enough people saw him last year for how good he was. I don't think people fully understood just how historic that rookie season was. There are a lot of guys to watch on that Magic roster, and they're going to be, I think, in that play-in mix this year. So you might actually see them play meaningful basketball next season. They might be one of those teams that pop in the play-in tournament as they're about to try here. Like, that's my most interest in this play-in tournament, is like what kind of teams are going to pop in it, because it might just be a situation where the Nuggets roll through it like they would the normal playoffs, or is a team like the Magic going to catch fire in this and, grab that trophy? I don't know. But the Magic as a whole and Banchero headlining them, he was teasing playing for Italy, by the way. I don't know what happened to that.
Yeah, that was a little bit. There's always that kind of fun stuff with the FIBA stuff where it's like, I could probably play there or this or that, It's probably a question of like, he's like, well, I get to play in the Olympics is usually how that
Right.
kind of
Definitely.
those guys decided. But the Magic are a really interesting team, and Banchero and then also with Wagner, like they had a chance to make a push for the play-in last year. They weren't good enough. They weren't able to close out a ton of games, but they had a ton of wins, good wins, not just you guys. They beat the Warriors. I remember there were a few other teams where I was like, damn, that's a pretty nice
They
win.
beat the Celtics 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like they had nice wins in their resume. And I feel like that's a team that would be really interesting that I think can make a play-in rise and a play-in run. But I got one more name for you that I'm interested in, and it's Chris Paul. I'm fascinated to see how Chris Paul plays with the Warriors.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm all in on him being a second unit guy, but I got very nervous when he had made those comments at Summer League when he said, hey, when somebody asked him about it, and he's like, are you the coach? Like, like offended by it. It brought shades of Carmelo Anthony yelling to Paul George in the Oklahoma City media day and going like, yo, P, they asking if I'm going to come off the bench, right? And it's like, no, but like you should. Like, that's the best role for you right now. And I think I'm fascinated to see what he does and how he handles being a Warrior.
I'm not very optimistic about it, just because I can't imagine, like, what is it going to look like at its best? Just him carrying all those guys on the second. I mean, they already have second unit concerns when it comes to the young talent on there that's unproven. So, I mean, he can raise up guys' levels. There's no doubt about that.
I think he will be the biggest asset to Klay Thompson in the second unit. Because, like, you got to remember, that second unit had Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson playing together. And how many times did we see Klay come off the screen wide open, not get the ball, and then do one of these, like, and then Poole throws a ridiculous shot or a bad turnover or something. Like, there's an element of that where I think Chris is going to find him and make a point to find him in that stuff. I think he'll be interesting, but he has to embrace the role as a second unit guy. If he doesn't, there's going to be a lot of problems there. Like, I just don't see how you put him in the starting unit. They had the best starting five when they were healthy.
Right.
Net rating and all that stuff. And I just don't know, like, where do you take him out? I mean, where do you put him in? Who are you taking out? You're going to go small and take Kevon Looney out? Like, you're really small at that point with Curry, with CP in that regard, and that puts a lot of pressure on Wiggins to have to guard fours because I don't think Klay can. And then, or are you taking Wiggins out? Like, what do you like? There's a lot of different stuff that's very challenging there to make him as a starter. And I think I'm just fascinated and really interested to see how he handles that.
Yeah, just all the things that put those two together out of necessity. It's one of the weirdest landings I've ever seen for an NBA player in a really consequential spot. And he's obviously great, coming off a down year. He's had injuries late in the seasons. So maybe it's a team that can fit him in and better get him to that finish line rather than being a team that fully relies on him. Oh, but it's going to take so much to work out because it is awkward as it gets, not to mention everything that set it up. Poole, who should still be there, but isn't for numerous reasons. And him sort of being a stopgap guy, too, to make the money work on this roster is weird in itself. So that is intriguing. There's no doubt about it. One guy who I think is just going to be box office soon, and I think he's playing in the World Cup, which is going to be fun as well. This team intrigues me. You mentioned the gauntlet of the West. I'm trying to figure out how I can fit them into home court status if things really pop this year, but it's not going to happen. So I should just focus on getting them into the playoffs, which they did last year if you consider 10 teams in the playoffs. Josh Giddey. You went Chet. I'm going Giddey. Man, is he incredible. And everyone always keeps talking about like, oh, a real point guard, the pure point guard. He plays that role, with the aggressive scoring and with, covering every part of the game. And he's only turning 21 this year. He's already done so much in his young career, scored 17 a game last year, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, just astonishing numbers at his age. His game's so fun to watch. He's had some magical passes early in his career, and the shooting's ticking in the right direction. And if his shooting really ends up coming around, I mean, this is like an all NBA level guy one day if he really fills out and continues to progress, because he's already done so much so early in his career. This Thunder team's really good. I was looking at their roster. They have 20 guys. All of them are really good. I think everyone around the NBA is waiting to see who gets cut from this roster, because
it gets hard. They got to
Yeah.
cut 5 guys. Like, it's not an easy.
But are they a team that could surprise people at a high level this year?
I don't think so, only because I feel like everybody's on them at this point. Like you're talking about, fit them into home court. Like, that's the challenge in the West. Just how tough the West is going to be. Like, it's going to take some luck with other teams being bad and situations with that stuff. But like, they're also really young still.
Mm-hmm.
And Giddey's really good. Like, his passing and his playmaking. I loved last summer league when Giddey, as a second-year guy, played summer league to play with Chet Holmgren, and you could see the chemistry start to build. Obviously, we didn't get to see it, in the season, but you saw that stuff there, and he did a great job finding Chet. I think that's going to be a great combo for the Thunder in the season, of just those two guys kind of running pick and roll off of each other in the second unit. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun stuff that they can kind of do off of that, and a lot of things they could play off of that. He's a fun pick. Like, he's a fun pick. I think that, to be honest, that whole OKC roster is interesting and intriguing.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to be the thing to keep an eye on.
Including guys who could get cut here. I was going through the roster yesterday because obviously the Celtics opened up a roster spot. I think everyone's just waiting to see who's going to fall through there. The two non-guaranteeds are Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe, both coming off rock-solid seasons there. Poku, does he hang on after a couple awkward years?
Just cut him. It's done, man. Like, this whole Poku experiment's over and done with. Like, stop this. Like, Isaiah Joe.
Well, someone else will give him a chance if they cut him, right?
Sure, but like, he's still not going to play much. Like, he's just not good, guys. Like, it's not. As a guy who saw Yaroslav Korolev up close for a few years, like, trust me, guys, like, it ain't there. We can keep trying to force it. It ain't there.
All right, you want to throw one more name out before we get you out of here?
Yeah, I think the guy I'm kind of interested to watch a little bit, and this is sort of a weird one for me to throw out there, I'm kind of interested to watch if Kuzma has another solid season.
Okay. I was surprised he went back to Washington, but he got paid, as you said.
Yeah, and I think that's the question. Like, now that he got paid, like, was this just one of those guys that had a big year, his free agent year, and all that stuff? And that whole market for the wing players dried up so quickly. I think once Utah made the John Collins trade, everybody was like, okay, we all got to go back to our teams. That's the end of it, across the board. But I think I'm interested to see if he can kind of replicate, that the season. People forget he hit a ton of shots at the end of quarters and end of games. And I think that's the stuff. Like, I'll be interested to see if he can keep that up. Is this real, or was this just a 1 year sort of like, hey, I got to make sure I get a big contract?
That makes me think of a different one. I was going to go in a different direction here with Mobley, but I think Mobley's coming off a, defensive player of the year caliber year. Disappointing playoffs. The offense is still behind where you probably want it to be, but it makes me think of, you mentioned Kuzma, Bradley Beal.
Yeah.
I mean, played in obscurity relatively for 2 years. Now he's back in the limelight on a team that's going to get a ton of attention. He's the third guy in that dynamic. The whole dynamic there intrigues me. Like, defensive coach with an offensive team, no depth if you're going off what they did in the playoffs last year, that group, though they brought in a few new names, some unsung guys that might have some promise. But this is mostly going to be about 3 wings coming together, much like we talked about with the Celtics, and just trying to make this work. But where's the playmaking come from? Paul's gone. He was such a big part of that. Can these guys stay healthy? But Beal's the one, to me, like, he's talking about becoming one of the best two-way guys in the league. And everyone who's watched his defense has been like, huh? And then,
Oh, really? Right. Like, really? Now we're going to play defense?
but as a third guy in this dynamic, given the way he's moved off the ball, given the way he's shot in the past, like there might not be a better star to be a third man in a big three in the league right now, offensively than him. Like some of the secondary playmaking. I know they're calling him the point guard. I'd probably want the ball in Booker's hands more than his, but I don't know where this is going to go. Like this could be a like hugely disappointing disaster, like some of the star combos we've seen in the past, or this could just really pop because there's just so much scoring here in an offensive league.
This is a very sort of like hit or miss situation, right?
Yeah.
Like the hardest thing is like, again, this is a team that look at all the guys they had to sign. Like I thought they had a great offseason for the situation that they were in to bring in the guys that they brought in. None of them are like flashy names or anything like that where we're like, wow, this is amazing. And I'm talking about after post Beal trade, but just free agency, but like, I felt like they kind of filled out their bench a little bit. I think, Yuta Watanabe is a nice piece there. And he had a little flash in Brooklyn for a while, a little bit of a run. I think like they got some good pieces. I think Vogel's a better coach than people think just because the Lakers screwed him and put him with Westbrook and put him in a tough situation. I think I think he can really get some stuff out of them defensively and how they go. For me, the important guy for this team is DeAndre Ayton.
Right.
Because as important as Beal is, it's Ayton. Can Ayton be forceful on defense, roll hard, and be okay with the role he's going to have on offense? Because he's going to have a lesser role on offense. He's not going to get a ton of post touches. He's not going to get he's going to pick and roll, and he's not going to get the passes that he used to get from Chris Paul. It's now coming from Booker. It's coming from Beal. Like, listen, even as Chris Paul is deteriorating, the passing was still there, that skill. And I don't know if they fully replicate that and been able to replace that. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles that. I mean, that's really just a fascinating team. Honestly, again, Bobby, this whole season is going to be really interesting because there are so many teams that are interesting to keep a track of. Even the teams that we normally go like, oh, they're bad. Like we have a lot more, like Charlotte's going to be interesting. Like, just think about it that, like, that's a wild thing, but just think about the fact that, like, Charlotte, if LaMelo Ball's healthy, Brandon Miller, then you bring back Miles Bridges, and it's going to be interesting just on that end.
Yeah.
Like how
and then the opposite end in the West, like Portland, if they make the right trade here, they could be good again quickly.
No, they'll be bad. They'll be bad. I got a lot of Portland.
No, I mean in terms of years.
Yeah. No, I mean, because the beauty for Portland, and I get in trouble with Portland fans all the time. Like, I don't think Portland fans understand. They've already won the Dame trade because they already have his replacement in Scoot Henderson.
Right.
Most teams, when they trade their superstar, have to suck for a few years. They already have their guy. They already
have a couple guys from bad seasons with Lillard, and if you believe in Sharp.
Right. And I'm lukewarm there, but like the element of that stuff, but like, so like, yeah, if they can get some picks back and whatnot and then slowly build up, like that's really where they need to go. And if they can get off Nurkic's contract in this trade, man, that's even a bigger win. But they've already won the trade, and I don't think Portland fans fully understand that. But yeah, this is a team that's going to be whatever bad for a couple of years. I like Scoop. I think he's going to be really good. I'm fascinated to see how that kind of plays out. I think they have to find a new home for Simons. I think him and Scoop probably not a great pairing. But it'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out across the board. But there's so many teams that are going to be worth watching. Houston's going to be interesting. I'm just curious about Thompson. I want to see Thompson,
Right.
Like he had a really fun game in Summer League and then got hurt and was out the rest of Summer League. Like, like there's some fun stuff there. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting with Udoka going over. How does that work?
Yeah. I ran into Ime in Vegas. He went from one situation to another for sure.
Yeah.
In terms of the roster he's got here, it's going to be, he could increase his stock again quickly as a coach here by making this work, because this is a challenging coaching job. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. He is Mo Dakhil. Lots of interesting teams. He's keeping an eye on all of them into this NBA season. Before we get out of here, just a real quick shout out to Factor Meals. Great deal for the summer. Meals ready in 2 minutes when you head over there, and you can get 50% off your first box when you head to factormeals.com/garden50. Dozens and dozens of choices. I've enjoyed them. The shakes are to die for. They really are. I'm about to go order some more boxes and shakes for this week because you're on the move. You don't have time. 2 minutes, boom, in and out. Lots of possibilities, lots of snacks, add-ons you can get here too. So go get 50% off your first box at factormeals.com/garden50. Mo, always enjoy talking to you. You can go check him out, Twitter, everywhere else where his stuff is floating around. Always a great conversation, Mo, and hopefully we'll talk to you again here into the season.
For sure. Thank you very